I used to believe loneliness only belonged to people who slept alone. I was wrong. Every night, I lay beside someone who loved me, or at least, someone who used to. The space between us wasn't measured in inches but in silence. Conversations had become functional, trimmed down to questions like, "Did you eat?" Or, "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" We shared a life, a roof, a routine, but not ourselves. I told myself this was normal. Long relationships settle. Passion quiets down. Real life replaces fantasy. That's what mature love was supposed to look like, right? Calm, predictable, safe. But safety can feel a lot like invisibility. Some evenings, I would sit by the window long after dark, watching the city breathe, cars passing, lights flickering on and off in other people's homes. I'd wonder what those walls were holding. Laughter, arguments, desire. I felt guilty for wondering. I had no right to feel empty. Nothing was wrong, and yet, something was missing. I stopped talking about my dreams because no one seemed interested anymore. I stopped sharing my fears because they were met with quick reassurances instead of understanding. Over time, I learned how to smile convincingly, how to nod, how to play my role perfectly. Partner, support system, reliable presence. But inside, I felt paused, like a song stopped mid-note. That's when he started crossing my mind. The African man wasn't someone I thought about intentionally. He appeared quietly, like a memory that didn't ask permission. A voice I had heard before, calm, deep, unhurried. Someone who spoke as if he wasn't trying to impress, only to connect. There had been nothing inappropriate between us. No promises, no confessions, just moments that lingered longer than they should have. I told myself it meant nothing. Still, on nights when the silence felt heavier than usual, I wondered what it would feel like to be truly seen again. Not desired, seen, understood without having to explain myself. Missed when absent. That thought alone filled me with shame. I loved my partner, or at least, I loved who we used to be. I loved our history, our shared memories, the way our lives were intertwined. Walking away from that felt unthinkable. Betraying it, even emotionally, felt unforgivable. So I pushed the feeling down. Buried it under responsibilities, routines, distractions. I told myself tomorrow would be better. That effort would fix everything. That love could be revived if I just tried harder. But loneliness doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits. That night began like any other, quiet, uneventful, ordinary. I had no idea it would be the last night I'd ever feel this version of myself. The one who still believed she was fully in control. The one who thought temptation announced itself loudly. Sometimes, it doesn't knock at all. Sometimes, it simply calls. The phone rang when it shouldn't have. It was late, too late for casual conversations, too late for anything that didn't carry intention. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the fan and the distant sound of traffic outside. My partner was already asleep, turned away from me, breathing evenly, unaware of the storm forming just inches away. I stared at the screen as it lit up the darkness. His name. For a moment, I didn't move. I told myself the call meant nothing. People called each other all the time. There was probably a simple reason, something harmless, something forgettable. Still, my heart was already beating faster, as if it knew something my mind refused to admit. Don't answer, I thought. But my hand reached out anyway. Hello. My voice sounded unfamiliar, softer than I expected. He didn't rush to speak. When he did, his voice was calm, steady, like someone who wasn't afraid of silence. He asked how I was, not in the polite way people usually do, but as if he genuinely wanted to know the answer. I hesitated, then replied with the truth I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time, I'm tired. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. That was the first crack. We talked about small things at first, the day, the weather, nothing important. Yet every word felt heavier than it should have. More deliberate, more present. I kept glancing toward the bedroom door, half expecting to be caught doing something wrong, even though all I was doing was talking. Still, guilt crept in, quiet but sharp. Then he said it, not boldly, not dramatically. I can take you home if you want. The words sat between us, unclear and dangerous. I was already home. We both knew that. What he offered wasn't a ride, it was an escape, wrapped in simplicity. A moment away from expectations. From labels. From the version of myself I was tired of performing. I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the weight of it. "It's late," I said, hoping the excuse would end the conversation. "It is," he agreed. "That's why I called now." My chest tightened. Every reason not to go ran through my head. My partner asleep in the other room. The life I had built. The line I'd never crossed before. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't what I did. But another voice whispered louder, "Just talk. Just step outside. Just breathe." I told myself it didn't count as betrayal if nothing physical happened. I told myself I deserved one honest moment. One night where I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. The lie formed easily on my tongue when I said I'd be out for a bit. No explanation. No details. Just absence. As I stepped into the cool night air, phone still warm in my hand, I felt something shift inside me. Not excitement. Not fear. Permission. And in that moment, before anything truly happened, I crossed a line I couldn't see, but would feel forever. The city felt different at night, quieter, softer, as if it were holding its breath along with me. When I saw him waiting, there was no dramatic greeting. No lingering stare. Just a nod, a small smile, and the sound of a car door opening. I slipped inside, heart racing, telling myself I could still turn back. That this was just a conversation. That nothing had happened yet. The car moved, and with it, the distance between who I was and who I was becoming. We didn't rush to fill the silence. Streetlights passed in slow rhythm, painting fleeting shadows across his face. He kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. That calm made everything else feel louder. My thoughts, my doubts, the question I didn't dare ask, why does this feel so right when it's so wrong? He asked me about my life, really asked. Not the surface version I recited automatically, but the parts beneath it. When was the last time I felt excited? When did I start feeling invisible? The questions weren't invasive. They were gentle, patient. I surprised myself by answering. Words spilled out that I had been holding back for years. About feeling taken for granted. About loving someone and still feeling alone. About how loneliness can exist even in a shared bed. He didn't judge. He didn't offer advice. He just listened, like my feelings mattered simply because they were mine. At one point, we stopped somewhere quiet. The engine went silent, and suddenly the night felt very close. Too close. I was aware of the space between us, small enough to notice, large enough to respect. That restraint made my chest ache more than any touch could have. I realized then that this wasn't about desire in the way I had always understood it. It was about recognition, about being seen without having to ask, about someone choosing to stay present instead of distracted. That realization scared me, because I knew, without a doubt, that I was already betraying something sacred. He spoke softly about his own life, about distance, about loss, about learning to live with what cannot be forced. Our stories didn't match, but they echoed. Two people meeting not to be saved, but to be understood. Time slipped by unnoticed. Minutes felt like seconds. I forgot to check my phone. Forgot where I was supposed to be. In that suspended moment, the version of me who carried responsibility, loyalty, and guilt faded into the background. And then reality crept back in. I thought about the person asleep back home. About the trust I was quietly unraveling. About the morning that would come no matter what I did next. My chest tightened again, this time with guilt sharp enough to cut through the warmth. When he finally drove me back, neither of us spoke much. Words would have cheapened what the silence held. Before I stepped out, he looked at me, not with expectation, not with ownership, but with understanding. That was the most dangerous part. As I walked away, I knew something irreversible had happened. There had been no dramatic act, no scandalous moment. Just one night where I allowed myself to feel fully seen. And somehow, that felt like the greatest betrayal of all. Morning arrived the way it always did, soft light through the curtains, the quiet hum of a world continuing without pause. Everything looked the same. That was the cruelest part. I stood in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee I didn't remember making, staring at nothing. My reflection in the dark window looked familiar, yet altered, like a version of me that had learned something it could never unlearn. I hadn't slept much, not because of guilt alone, but because my mind refused to return to the person I had been before that night. When my partner spoke, their voice sounded normal, warm, even. They asked about my day, about plans, about things that suddenly felt trivial. I answered carefully, measuring each word, aware of how easily lies slip into ordinary conversations. That scared me more than the night itself. I kept waiting for the guilt to crush me completely. It didn't. Instead, something quieter settled in, a clarity I hadn't expected. I realized I wasn't changed because of what almost happened, or even because of what emotionally did. I was changed because I now knew what I had been missing. And knowing that made pretending impossible. Throughout the day, memories of the night returned in fragments. The stillness, the way someone listened without interrupting, the feeling of being present rather than tolerated. None of it was dramatic, yet all of it felt profound. I wasn't fantasizing about him. I wasn't planning anything. What haunted me was the contrast. Love shouldn't feel like disappearance. I looked at my relationship differently now. Not with anger or resentment, but with honesty. I saw where I had gone quiet instead of speaking up. Where comfort had replaced connection. Where we both had stopped choosing each other without noticing when it happened. And still, I felt the weight of my betrayal. I had crossed a line, even if no one else could see it. Trust doesn't require witnesses to be broken. I carried that truth alone, heavy and undeniable. Confession hovered at the edge of my thoughts, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Some realizations need time before they can be spoken aloud. I never saw him again. That surprised people when I later hinted at the story. They expected a continuation, a secret romance, a dramatic ending. But life doesn't always unfold that way. Sometimes, a single moment exists only to reveal something you've been avoiding. That night didn't destroy my relationship. But it changed the terms of my existence within it. I could no longer hide behind routine or blame silence on time. I had felt what it was like to be fully present, and I knew I couldn't unknow it. Some nights still, when the house is quiet, I think about the call that changed everything. Not with longing, but with understanding. Because infidelity doesn't always begin with touch. Sometimes, it begins with truth, and the cost of finally hearing it.